December 4th, 1950, North Korea, -20 degrees. A U.S. Navy Corsair fighter is going down. The pilot, Ensign Jesse Brown, is alive. His left leg is crushed against the instrument panel. Smoke is rising from the engine cowling, and he is 17 miles behind enemy lines in the mountains above the Chosin Reservoir, with 100,000 Chinese soldiers closing in from every direction. From above, his wingman circles. He can see Jesse moving in the cockpit, barely, but moving. Lieutenant J.G. Thomas Hudner has enough fuel to make it back to the carrier. He has his orders, his rank, his future, and every rational reason to turn south. He radios the flight leader. "I'm going in." He dumps his weapons, drops his flaps, and puts his own plane into the ground. The Korean War had been raging for 5 months. The United States and its allies were not winning. By November 1950, 100,000 Chinese troops had secretly crossed the Yalu River and encircled an entire Marine division at the Chosin Reservoir. Newspapers back home called them the Lost Legion. The temperature dropped to 30 below. Men were losing fingers. Weapons were freezing solid. Into that hell, on the morning of December 4th, 6 F-4U Corsair fighters launched from the deck of USS Leyte to fly close air support for the Marines trapped on the ground. This is Echoes of Valor X. Today, we tell the true story of Thomas Hudner, the pilot who gave up everything to stay beside his friend. Thomas Hudner was born on August 31st, 1924, in Fall River, Massachusetts, the oldest of 5 children. His father ran a successful chain of grocery stores. The family was comfortable, the kind of New England upbringing that came with private schools, lacrosse teams, and country clubs. Tom was captain of the track team at Phillips Academy in Andover. He was a class officer, a student council member, a young man whose life seemed already arranged before him, neat and certain. In the spring of 1943, he was set to follow his father to Harvard University, when a telegram arrived from Congressman Joseph Martin. Tom Hudner was being offered an appointment to the United States Naval Academy. He accepted without hesitation. He graduated in 1946, served briefly aboard the cruiser USS Helena in the Pacific, then rotated to Pearl Harbor as a communications officer. He had no particular interest in aviation, then his shipmates dared him. He volunteered for flight training in 1948, was posted to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and that is where he met Jesse Brown. They could not have come from more different places. Jesse Leroy Brown was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, the son of a sharecropper who twice lost factory work and settled his family on a tenant farm in the Delta town of Lux. The poverty was real and constant. Jesse grew up with little comfort outside of his family's love and a dream so large it had no business belonging to a black boy from rural Mississippi in 1944. He wanted to fly. He studied at Ohio State University. He applied to the Navy's aviation program. He was told, in every direction he turned, that men like him did not become naval aviators. He applied again and again. On October 21st, 1948, Ensign Jesse Leroy Brown received the Wings of Gold, the first African-American ever to qualify as a United States Navy aviator. When Tom Hudner met Jesse, Brown was already a known name in the squadron. He had faced discrimination inside the very institution that was supposed to be his home. Some men in the Navy would not shake his hand. Tom Hudner walked across the room with his hand outstretched. That handshake began a friendship that would not end until the mountains above Chosin. Jesse was considered one of the most promising pilots in Fighter Squadron 32. He loved to buzz his cottage in Warwick, Rhode Island, to make his wife Daisy laugh and his daughter Cam wave from the yard. Tom buzzed his father's golf course in Fall River. 2 young men, 2 different Americas, flying the same sky. Their squadron was redesignated for close air support and posted to the carrier USS Leyte. By October 1950, they were off the coast of Korea. They had no idea what was coming. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a trap. The 1st Marine Division, roughly 15,000 men, was surrounded by an estimated 100,000 Chinese soldiers. The Marines were fighting to survive in conditions that defied comprehension. Vehicles wouldn't start. Blood plasma froze before it could be administered. The dead were stacked like cordwood at supply depots because the ground was too hard to dig. In the air above them, fighter pilots from USS Leyte flew mission after mission, strafing enemy positions to keep the Marines alive long enough to move. On December 4th, 6 Corsairs launched on an armed reconnaissance sweep north of the reservoir. Thomas Hudner was the wingman for Jesse Brown, flying on his port side, close enough to watch his instruments, close enough to protect him. They were flying low over the ridgelines, searching for enemy troop concentrations, when Brown's Corsair was struck by small arms fire from the ground. The round entered the engine. The oil pressure began to drop. Brown's engine was seizing. He had no runway, no friendly territory within gliding distance. 17 miles of frozen mountains in every direction, with enemy forces on every road below. Jesse Brown controlled his stricken aircraft as long as he could, then brought it down on a snow-covered hillside. The Corsair hit hard. The nose crumpled. The cockpit collapsed forward, and Jesse's right leg was pinned between the instrument panel and the wreckage. From above, Hudner could see him in the cockpit. Moving, alive, the engine had begun to smoke. The other 4 aircraft circled overhead. They radioed for a rescue helicopter. They waited. The smoke thickened. Thomas Hudner looked at his instruments. He had fuel. He had altitude. He had a path back to the carrier. He had a friend in a burning plane. Here's where it gets strange. Hudner did not ask for permission. He did not wait for orders. He informed his flight leader he was going in, and he put his perfectly functional F-4U Corsair into a wheels-up crash landing on the same frozen hillside. He hit the snow-covered slope hard. The aircraft shuddered and skidded to a stop. Hudner climbed out and ran, wading through waist-deep snow for 50 yards in sub-zero air to reach Jesse Brown's aircraft. What he found was worse than he had hoped. Brown was conscious, but barely. His right leg was crushed. The instrument panel had collapsed onto him. The angle of the crash meant the cockpit sat at a tilt that made it nearly impossible to reach from outside, and the engine was on fire. Hudner began packing snow into the burning cowling with his bare hands, trying to smother the flames. He tried to pull Jesse free. He could not. The wreckage had him. He waded back through the snow to his own plane and radioed again. He needed an ATS. He needed a fire extinguisher. He needed help. A rescue helicopter arrived. Its pilot, Marine Lieutenant Charles Ward, landed and brought a fire extinguisher. Both men worked to free Jesse Brown. The axe was not strong enough. The wreckage did not move. Jesse was still conscious. He asked about his wife, about Daisy. Hudner told him help was coming. They kept working. The temperature was dropping further. Chinese troops were known to be moving in the valley below. The helicopter could not stay on the ground indefinitely, and Jesse Brown's consciousness was fading. After nearly an hour on that hillside, Lieutenant Ward made the decision. They had to go. To stay was to be captured or to die. Hudner did not want to leave. He had crashed his plane, burned his hands, and exhausted everything he had, and he could not bring his friend home. Ensign Jesse Leroy Brown did not come home from that hillside. Thomas Hudner had intentionally destroyed a United States Navy aircraft without orders. He had crash-landed in enemy territory. By every regulation in the book, a court-martial was a serious possibility. Instead, on April 13, 1951, President Harry S. Truman placed the Medal of Honor around Thomas Hudner's neck in a ceremony at the White House. He became the first Medal of Honor recipient of the Korean War. Daisy Brown, Jesse's widow, was there. She watched a president honor the man who had refused to let her husband die alone on a frozen Korean mountainside. When asked about what he had done, Thomas Hudner said he did what any pilot would have done for his wingman. He said that for the rest of his life. He never once called it heroism. He called it friendship. A few days after Jesse fell, the Navy faced a question no regulation had prepared them for. Brown's body was still visible in the cockpit of his downed Corsair. Retrieving it would mean sending men into enemy territory again. Hudner's captain planned to fly a flight surgeon in by helicopter. Hudner argued against it. The risk was too great. Instead, a formation of corsairs from Fighting Squadron 32 flew one final mission to that hillside. From the air, Jesse Brown's body was still visible. The planes dropped napalm on the two wrecked aircraft, Jesse's and Tom's, and gave Ensign Brown the only funeral they could, a funeral pyre on a frozen Korean mountain. Thomas Hudner continued to serve in the United States Navy for 23 more years. He flew missions in Vietnam. He rose to the rank of captain. He retired in 1973. He spent the decades that followed speaking for veterans, advocating for those who never got recognition, and keeping the name of Jesse Brown alive. He remained close to Daisy Brown and Jesse's daughter Pam for the rest of his life, a bond that held for more than 7 decades. In July 2013, at the age of 88, Thomas Hudner traveled to Pyongyang, North Korea. He wanted one final thing: to bring Jesse home. North Korean authorities denied his request. Jesse Brown's remains are still somewhere on that hillside, above the Chosin Reservoir. In 2012, the United States Navy announced that a new destroyer would carry his name. USS Thomas Hudner, DDG-116, was commissioned to sail the same waters Tom once flew over. On November 13, 2017, Thomas Jerome Hudner Jr. passed away at his home in Concord, Massachusetts. He was 93 years old. At Arlington National Cemetery, on the day he was interred with full military honors, a missing man formation flew overhead, performed by Strike Fighter Squadron 32, the same squadron, the same sky. One jet peeled away and did not return to formation. They say you do not know who a man truly is until the moment it costs him something to be decent. Thomas Hudner paid everything: his plane, his career, his hands, his safety, not for a mission objective, not for a medal, not for history. He did it because Jesse Brown was his friend, and a friend does not circle overhead. America still stands because of men like this. Subscribe so these men are never forgotten.